Up next, we react to some new research that suggests that adult humans don't really age linearly, but actually age in bursts that occur in the mid 40s and the early 60s. All right, Tunde, for our second topic today, wanted to discuss, we saw a recent article talking about, and I've seen this in a few places lately, talking about how adult humans age in bursts, and not that when you go from 30 to 70, it's kind of like this slow progression that kind of proceeds at a steady pace, but actually in that same range, maybe you'll age some, but then there are bursts of aging. At around 44 years old, there'll be a burst of aging where things will change. Your body will change on a cellular level. And then again, in like around 60 or so, give or take, your body will change and, you'll become kind of enter a different stage of life, like in that sense. So your thoughts on just kind of generally, on this idea that humans would age in bursts like that, as opposed to, I think most people would think kind of it's like a linear thing, like in the same way that like your hair doesn't burst into gray, like you kind of go a little bit slowly into gray and then you look up after 15 years and you might be gray, but you didn't just go from, 43, no gray, 45, head full of gray type of thing. It's kind of, I think, our perception.
Well, some people do. But I've got some friends that went gray pretty fast and it's interesting. But even with that, as you're saying it, because like my gray has come at different stage, right? It started with a few strands and then sometimes there's a bit more comes out and then it slows down for a bit. But no, it makes sense. I think, look, it's interesting because even as you say it, it makes me realize that time is somewhat of a construct of how we perceive our own existence, right? The idea of, I think, entropy.
Oh man, you're going philosophical on me today.
Gotta go 30,000 feet.
Oh yeah, I see you put your glasses on. Now I get it.
Yeah. So remember, when the glasses go on, the IQ goes up by about 50 points. So it gets up to 70. So you're in trouble. No, but that's what I'm saying is that obviously from a mental aspect, we perceive time in a linear way and we're conditioned to know it minutes and seconds and hours and days and weeks and months and years and all that. So that creates a feeling in our mind that time is always linear in that way. But you're right. A lot of things in life, we talked about, recent discussion we had about history behaving more in a wave pattern than a linear, and so there's areas of reality. You can even go galaxy brain here, even string theory, right? Not everything is linear. And so the idea that the body would age in different ways at different parts of the human journey, let's say if the average lifespan in the United States is mid 80s, that you would age at different rates and your body would break down. Let's put it that way, right? The entropy of being alive at different rates at different times. That to me makes sense. It's realistic. And I think, like we're saying, since the article we're citing cites two ages specifically, 44 and 60. And I'm going to drag you up with me. We're both above age 44 now. I think we can speak on this.
Well, yeah, I definitely want to get I would say we'd be able to speak on some experience on this. But to me, generally, though, what's interesting to me about this is that it's kind of like, of course, like nobody questions whether the younger people age in bursts. Like puberty literally is a burst in aging, like where your body changes on a very specific level or on a lot of different levels. So you go from being a child body to an adult body, when you go through puberty, and that's occurring over a set number of years. And then even looking at the animal kingdom, like when you look at certain animals that they'll have these bursts of aging and so forth, or and some animals you got like butterflies and stuff you have metamorphosis and stuff. So the idea that this would happen to us is not something that because I think the visual appearance, because that tends to go in a more linear way, I think is why we assume that on the inside it's happening in a linear way, as opposed to like when kids will have growth spurts. And so visually, we see that it's a spurt. It's not like just a slow progression. And so I think that the visual of an adult seems gradual, but the concept that on the inside it's happening in different ways is definitely something I think that aligns with other areas of our experience, and so
Yeah.
that they've kind of identified two areas is just kind of that's the ability of science to just measure things better now. Like, they're sticking probes in people and taking blood samples and all that, and so they're able to measure things now that maybe they couldn't have measured 100 years ago. And so I think that's kind
Yeah.
of the inevitability of something like this. But it's pretty cool to hear. And I mean, yeah, as a person who's in my mid 40s, I was very interested to see, like, okay, well, so what exactly is supposed to have been happening to me or have happened to me over the last year or two. So I mean, I'll kick it to you first, though. So, like, as a person who's crossed that first threshold, what do you think? Do you think this is some BS, or do you think that they may be onto something?
Well, I just want to correct you, sir, because I just celebrated the 17th anniversary of my 30th birthday. So I'm technically not over 44 right now. Just letting you know, okay? So, yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting because I think, like everything else, I mean, puberty, you mentioned, is a good example because we have a certain range that it's like a bell curve, right? We've got 8 billion humans on the earth. So not everybody experiences everything at the exact same time. But we kind of generally say, 12 to 13 to about maybe, 18 or whatever is kind of the puberty range of a human going from a child to a young adult. Like you said, the metamorphosis, if we can use the butterfly.
We don't grow wings,
caterpillar.
though. We don't go into
Yeah.
a cocoon.
Hey,
But
man, you haven't raised a teenager yet. That cocoon stage is pretty bad. So, I got 2 under my belt and a young one now. He's just about to be 14 in a week.
oh yeah, so no, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to defer to you on that.
Yeah. That cocoon stage is interesting. The two older ones have blossomed in beautiful wings and they flew away nice and it's all
There you
good.
go. There we go.
And they come back sometimes and pick at the milkweed. We're good. But sometimes they come out of the cocoon and it's a disaster. So
Yeah. Hey man, we got esoteric Tunde today, man.
Yeah. So, but no. So kind of like. But the reason I bring it up, just the puberty thing, is because some kids do go through puberty very early, right? Like at 9 or 10 years old, and that's a bit of an outlier. And some kids, it starts very late, like 14 or 15, and that's an outlier. So I think with as we say, age 44, for me, I didn't feel it then. I felt it honestly more at 45 and 46. So that's why I'm not going to say it had to be 44. I'm just saying.
Well, no,
for
I
me,
think
it was
it
around
does
this.
give for the fact that it's kind of around that age, kind of mid 40s type of thing.
So, but I do feel it, and I think it's the jokes that we have, right? Like I joke around that, hey, I got low T. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just, I mean, I joke around. The girls think I'm looking at them when I go out, or so sometimes I just joke and say, man, I ain't looking at you. I got low T. Relax, I'm married. I'm good. Like I don't have energy to be looking at too many things anymore, and I'm happy about that. Like it's good. So humility is great, James. That's why.
So is that something you say is different than you 3 years ago?
No, not 3 years ago, but 20 years ago, yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So are there things that, and I want to give some thoughts.
No, but part of it,
but are there
James,
things that you can feel differently than you right now than you might have felt 3 years ago?
So on a serious note. The 3 years ago, the answer is no, because I'm married and I'm happy in my marriage and I'm not a cheat.
Even so not just that. Like you're also
no, but what I'm saying is, I've been single all the way till now in my 40s. I'd probably say, in the last few years, there's a difference I feel. And I'm going to be honest, James, I had a prostate infection when I was 45. That was the first time I dealt with some stuff like that, right? That was a change in my body. I could feel different when it comes to stuff like that. I had a heart attack last year, mild heart attack. Learned I got advanced artery disease. I'm learning at this stage of my life, and this is what I mean by the entropy, that my body is breaking down. And what I learned and what I realize is like climbing a mountain. This middle age is like we're at the summit. So I've been going up this hill and my body's been kind of, dealing with that. And now I'm in my, tipping into my late 40s. And be close to 50 in a few years, or I will be 50 in a few. I'm getting close to 50. And so my point is that I'm never going to be 25 again. And I've accepted that. And I think that's something that from a societal and cultural standpoint as Americans, we have a hard time coping with aging and with death. So I think that there's a whole nother part of this that goes along with that too, is our own emotional state as we age. You see
Well,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
but I took something completely different from the article, and just in terms of like things to look out for where you might have a noticeable change over the course of a short period of time. Like, so not comparing it to 20 years ago, but saying when I was 40, that I was I feeling a certain way, and then when I'm 45 or 46, am I feeling something different?
Yeah.
Now,
So let me
in
give
your
you an
case, well,
example then.
let me get in.
Okay.
In your case, though, because you're talking about some major health issues, like
Yeah.
that might have, like, your ability to perceive those things might have been thrown off, even if it did happen. Like, who knows? But if it did,
Yeah.
because it's like, okay, you had, a major infection, a mild heart attack, like those type of things might dominate your perception of your body around that time frame. For myself, I've noticed, different things. Some of the things that they've talked about, or that they mentioned, is saying just like you get a little less efficient in burning calories, you get a little less efficient in processing alcohol, things like that. Like your sleep requirements might go up, at least in terms of getting your best self compared to, when you're 35 or 40 or whatever. And so those types of changes, and then there's changes that then would follow in your 60s and so forth. And now the article we read was in Men's Health. We'll have it in the show notes, but that talked about the things you could do about it. I know for myself, I've always been very active and, working out, lifting weights and so forth. But I kind of, without being aware of this at the time, around my early 40s, I kind of got more committed to that stuff because I just felt like I know that as you get older, it gets harder to hold or to build muscle and to maintain muscle. So I was like, all right, well, I better get on it more, because if it's going to be harder to hold on to, let me try to get more of it. And, and so I have more of a buffer to kind of keep what I can keep.
You poured in all that testosterone, man. It's like the toilet paper during the pandemic, bro.
Hey, well, that's the other benefit.
Leave some of that
your
for the rest of us,
But
man.
the thing that really stood out to me about this, that I'll before I kick it back, was that even you mentioned with the puberty and how there's a range on when people can go through that. Sometimes there are environmental factors with that, whether it be food or things going on around you. And so I've considered, and even reading this, like, I bet you there's environmental factors, and I've seen some other things where people talk about this, as far as what you eat or your activity or the air you breathe and things like that can influence the severity of this kind of an aging burst, and how, like how hard it hits you, and then how much it expresses. Like there may be ways to stave off. Like people talk about lifting heavy weights, you can stave off some of the muscle loss that you have and so forth. So I don't look at this as something we have no control over, but I would say definitely that my energy level is something where I have to make sure, like if I don't do right, and then alcohol too, if I'm not careful enough, if I don't do right in terms of watching what I'm eating and when I'm eating it, then I'll feel it more than I did even a couple of years ago. It makes me try to be even more disciplined, because I have a narrower path to walk. If I want to feel at my best, I got to walk a narrower path. Whereas I feel like just a couple of years ago, it was not that narrow. And that was before I read this, that I kind of felt like, okay, hey, yeah, I feel like I need to be a little bit more on top of it. And I kind of adjusted in advance, again, I got more disciplined with my workouts and stuff like that. So, it's interesting to me to read something like this, though.
Tell your wife, be careful, because I know where you live, that if there's a big dude sneaking in your room in the middle of the night, taking samples from you, that it's just me. She shouldn't be scared.
You try to discover and see what's going on.
I'm going to be up there taking a syringe of that testosterone you're storing up,
Hey, that's a big part of it, man. Lift heavy weights. I don't want to lose my
I'll inject it into mine, my low T. I just, because I'm lazy, so I won't need to work out. I just steal your stuff. But now, it's funny you bring it up, because, I definitely can say the exact things that I feel a bit different in the recent years. Definitely the alcohol. I love whiskey and bourbon, and I love it since probably my mid-30s, when my palate got off the fruity drinks, And I find that, honestly, man, I got to be so bougie. It's got to be 100 proof, 50% alcohol, which is terrible for you. But that's because that's the only way I don't get a headache for like 3 days. Because if I drink something that's 80 proof for 3 days, I got the foggy head. And like you, I got to be on point mentally for my profession and, deal with numbers and stuff. And I don't like having that foggy head feeling where I can't recall information and I can't do calculations quickly. So I've had to adjust that, right? And even with what I shared with, everybody here on the show, with my heart and that stuff last year, the cardiologist was like, dude, stay off that liquor, that heart, So, forced me to go more to red wine and do all that, and just change the lifestyle because of some real physical changes that have happened in the recent period. And the other, I'll say this, and I'm a humble guy that is not insecure and fine with sharing. That prostate infection I told you about is the first time in my life I really dealt with ED, and it probably was about 3 months that it wasn't working, man, and that was tough. Like that was a real psychological bridge to cross. I real feel fortunate, honestly, that I'm married to the woman I'm married to. That was made me feel okay. Didn't make me feel like I wasn't a man. Like I'm serious. Like I realized at that point how vulnerable as a male emotionally I was. That if I had a different wife that belittled me, that could have been a whole different thing. I mean, so. I went to did the pills
you would probably
and all that
you
for a
would probably
while.
have a Porsche now or something like that.
What was that?
Yeah, you would probably have a Porsche or something like that.
I could have had a convertible, had all this insecurity and stuff. You're right. Banging a bunch of 25-year-olds now. You're right. I need to go tell her she should have been real mean to me and rude. I'll go tell her.
Saved you from all that. She saved you from all that.
Yeah, no, I can say, look, I'm still young enough. I go buy them convertible, and maybe some 25-year-olds will look at me. So, You don't think that'll work?
Well, now I will say the one that's still in front of us, Lord willing, is the 60 around the 61. That was interesting to me about that one. That one talks about like your immune system kind of down regulates a little bit, and like muscle mass. And I wonder now, just real quick, I wonder if when you're looking at these things, like, is this you mentioned entropy? Is this just entropy, or is this kind of like a curve that our body just kind of goes on? Like, is there some other evolutionary reason why, as you age, these types of things they occur when they occur or how they occur in conjunction together and so forth? I don't know that there is, but it is that make for a softer landing, so to speak, as you kind of age out, or like would we have? Because you and I have talked about this, like for if the 50-year-old had the testosterone of a 20-year-old. Like things would be a lot crazier in society, like because testosterone makes you kind of crazy, so in some good ways and in some bad ways.
Think about it. No, it's a great point, James. I never really thought of it,
to finish the sentence, the thought of like how your body kind of scales these things down, or whether it be your muscle mass, whether it be this or that. Muscle mass has a lot of caloric requirements. So obviously we live in an age of plentiful food in our country, at least. So having a bunch of muscle mass isn't as much of a hindrance as it might have been for a 50-year-old, 1,000 years ago. So I just wonder, like, what's the kind of flow of this as it fits into kind of our evolutionary thing? But you can throw it, react to that, or last comment.
No, that's great. I think because I never gave it much thought. So I'll say this, obviously, without having the full answer, right? I'm going to speculate here, but I'm going to assume you're right that there is an evolutionary reason for it. Like a part of it also, I think there is just the entropy of aging, and
it's probably both,
oxidation.
But
oxidation.
But there seems to be, I would say, there's probably an entropy to it, but there's probably also a rhyme or reason to what gives out.
Well, that's why. Let me give you my thought, because it's actually, I'm thinking of it as you're saying, because I never really thought of this. I'm wondering, because you're right. If you think about humans evolved, let's say, in the last few 100,000 years in very small hunter-gatherer bands, right? Like maybe couple dozen people at the most. So one would think that, number one, from a resource allocation, like you said, testosterone does what? Builds muscle, right? So you need a lot of food to, like you said, if men were in their 50s and 60s all jacked up with a bunch of muscle, that's resource allocation. That's more people needing to suck on resources, things like that in the society. The other thing would be maybe internal competition.
It makes them more short-sighted too.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, at some point, right, the young men who are in their 20s, let's say, need to be the ones procreating and all that. Whereas, so it makes sense that, remember, too, life expectancy didn't used to be that long. So,
I got to throw something at you real quick. Also, it also creates the conditions in those type of situations for the next generation to kind of take over and not have these old dudes and old ladies kind of running the society indefinitely, which is kind of a problem we live with now.
Yeah, so that's a great point, because think about it. Yeah, you're right. In a hunter-gatherer band, probably things like physical strength mattered more. So you're right. Guys because that's what I was going to say is guys our age in the late 40s, mid-late 40s were considered older back in the hunter-gatherer days. So if someone did make it to 50 or 60, they couldn't sit in there and tangle with an 18, 20-year-old guy. So you're right. There's a certain level of authority, hierarchy. Now, the older person may have been seen as a respected elder, right? And I think this has been documented actually as evolutionary thing with grandmothers, maybe not so much the men, but the importance of a grandmother in the village society, the hunter-gatherer society, that helps with things like childbirth, rearing the children, all that. And so, yeah, I could think, James, that there probably was some sort of evolutionary reason, and really probably a life reason. Maybe this is probably most living organisms, which is also getting out of the way for future life. This idea that things are born and die, and really death being a part of the journey. So if
but I don't think
forever,
that how you age necessarily is about dying as much as how, like, again, it's when things happen and what happens first. Like, why would your immune system downregulate in your 60s? And I'm sure there's some kind of reason for that. And
at some point,
you
got to die.
That may be about other issues, though, is what I'm saying. Like, for you to have more longevity or whatever, like, I don't know that your body is necessarily preparing to die. Maybe it is. Maybe, but most of the time, living organisms make adaptation choices about sustaining life, not about ending life. Like, there aren't many adaptation choices that are about, hey, this happened, so now I die, type of thing. So I don't know.
But there could be just a shelf life for a.
Well, but that there's some kind of organization to it, as opposed to it just being linear, just makes me wonder, kind of the evolutionary pressures that might have led to that. And I'm not even talking about 10,000 years ago. So I'm talking about, over the course of tens of thousands of years, So, but I mean, those are questions we're not going to have the answer to. But like I said, it's interesting, this research about the aging in bursts and, just how that affects us all. And, again, that we're lucky enough to make it that long. But nonetheless, we're going to close the show for now. So we appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Until next time, I'm James Keys.
And I was going to say, when I get to the pearly gates, I'll let you know. I'll ask that question.
All right.
Did it happen? What's this all about? And I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
And we'll talk to you soon.